coaching, Facebook coaching page, and we're going to get started here in just a minute. All right. Hello. Welcome. You are watching Unstuck, the Road to Reinvention. I'm your host, Lisa Neller, and I am a Reinvention life coach. I help women flourish through the use of positive psychology, self-coaching, and transformative conversation. So if you want to learn more about me and what I do, you can head over to lisanellercoaching.com. And if you are an empty nesting woman, please go over to reinventionlifecoach.com and get my free video series on how to reinvent your life from the ground up. Okay, so that's my intro, and I am so excited to we are in episode number 5, and we're going to talk about reinventing dating online during a pandemic. I got to tell you, I'm really glad it's not 1918, because for all the havoc that COVID-19 is creating, at least we have all this technology that has made it possible for us to get up-to-date information, communicate with our family and friends on Zoom. And I think things could be so much worse. But I'm excited today because I have Lauren Dixon back with us. She's back to share her wisdom. And we decided it would be a really good idea to talk about dating online during this really unique time in history. And most people are still looking for companionship. And so we're reinventing new ways to date. And so that it's not a problem, but it's more of an opportunity. So I want to reintroduce Lauren for those of you who may not know her. Excuse me. She is a licensed professional counselor in the state of Arizona. She has been practicing for several years and has her independent license and is currently on staff in the Student Care Center at Grand Canyon University. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology from the University of Arizona and a master's degree in professional counseling from Grand Canyon University. Lauren specializes in issues surrounding trauma and uses a variety of methods for helping people cope with life. She's also a certified yoga teacher and a violinist who performs at weddings and other events. And she does some recording work with other musical artists. So Lauren and I are both really committed and passionate about helping others with their mental health and how to have satisfying and intimate relationships, me as a life coach and her as a counselor. And we are also related, as she is my daughter. And we really enjoy working together on occasion like this. So my nickname for her is Missy. So welcome, Missy.
Thank you.
All right. So Lauren, we're going to get to you in just a minute. I just wanted to give a little background on my thoughts about dating and how different it is today than in the old days when I was dating. And we obviously didn't have online dating back in the 70s and 80s. And it was just quite different. You know the story, your dad and I dated for 8 years. And there were times when we were apart for 2 years, you know, on and off and such. And the growing of the relationship happened through rare long distance telephone calls and letter writing. And that's how we maintained our dating relationship when we were not in the same town. And of course, when we were in the same town, it was dating as usual, you know? So it's just so different. And I think, you know, too, well, you found your love on a dating app. And yep. I was like a little, oh no, you know, when you started doing that, but I'm so glad you did. And look who you found. So it's really been very great. So the first thing I want to do really is talk about relationships to set the foundation for this discussion, because I'd like to know what you think makes a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I think there's so much really packed into that question. What is a healthy relationship? And in the realm of counseling and the realm of life, relationship whether it's families, couples, friends, it's something I'm really interested in and passionate about and have done a lot of study. And I think when we're talking about just what are some of the foundational components for a healthy relationship, the top 3 things that come to my mind are healthy self-esteem in both partners, and managing our own self-esteem, really kind of understanding how to keep that in a healthy space and how to approach life from a place of self-worth and kind of knowing where your own foundation is. I think trust in relationship is the next really big thing. And there's really so much that's packed into that word itself. Trust is really about understanding boundaries. Can we give each other enough space to still be separate and function as individuals and trust each other to take accountability for our own feelings and our own thoughts and our own behaviors? And at the same time, do we demonstrate reliability, that I'm going to consistently do what I said I was going to do, and the ways that I act towards you are consistent? We know kind of what to expect from each other. And I think just integrity and acceptance as we communicate and as we navigate conflict and as we navigate just some of the barriers and obstacles that come up in life, being able to really seek understanding in a relationship rather than just wanting to project our own needs and expectations onto the other person is a really beautiful component of what brings health into a relationship. Really trying to communicate our own experiences and feelings and needs, but also to be able to step back to listen and hear and make sense of somebody else's experience being different. And then I think the last thing that's really important in healthy relationships is shared values, and really being aware of what are the things that are important to me, what are the things that I want to pursue and invest time and energy and resources into in my life. And if I'm seeking a partner, especially in dating, wanting to find somebody that shares those values. And it's not really about some values are right and others are wrong. It's just about the compatibility of, am I looking for somebody that is compatible with me in those ways?
Yeah, so I'm hearing a theme of, communication is huge, and having the skills to be able to communicate without losing your temper and things like that, like where you could develop a certain amount of patience and that kind of thing as you're navigating those relationships, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what is dating all about? I mean, like, what are people looking for?
I think of dating as a very experimental process. I think looking at it as experimental in nature creates some room to not necessarily know or expect a certain outcome. But I do think that people go into dating for different reasons, and that's okay. And my encouragement, if I'm talking with a friend or a client or somebody who's wanting to step into dating, is just to really be curious about what is your personal motivation going into it. Some people are looking for a distraction, especially during quarantine right now. Maybe if somebody's living alone or if they're not around a lot of people, just really wanting to talk to people and have something to do and something relational to focus on. Wanting to not feel lonely. Some people are looking just to get to know themselves better and to know other people better and to get a better sense of what is compatible with me and what do I like and what don't I like. And I think there's a lot we learn about ourselves through relationship. And then some people do have a very strong intention of, I'm looking for a partner, I'm looking for a long-term commitment or somebody to really integrate into my life. And I think while it's important to know what your intention is going into it, it's also important to be open to the idea that what you go into it expecting might not be the same thing that you find. I joke around a lot that when I started online dating, it was very experimental in nature. I wanted to push myself outside of my comfort zone and practice skills that I knew weren't comfortable for me to practice. And when I met my current love on a dating app, and he asked me right up front, can I assume you're looking for a serious relationship? And I was like, no, you can't assume that. That's not what I'm doing here. And yet I found that because that was there for me. So just to stay open, I think, is important.
Very good. Yeah. Okay. So how is online dating different from traditional dating? And I don't know if I need to define those, but I think you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think that when we think of traditional dating, or before online dating really came into the picture, it was more, either you meet somebody in person or you're introduced to somebody to meet in person. And I think the biggest difference when we look at online dating is just the speed at which things can progress, and also the screen that exists with online dating. There's a little bit less vulnerability up front because you can simply stop responding to somebody. You can simply choose not to engage with somebody. Whereas I think, back in the day with traditional dating, you're face to face in person. And so if something's not going well, you might go through a little bit more awkwardness, or there's more time in between conversations, or you're waiting, is this person going to call me? And with online dating, it really can speed up some of those processes. And also, you have so many more options to work with all at one time. A lot of the dating apps or sites, you're swiping or looking through, dozens of people potentially in one day, and then carrying on conversations with multiple people at a time. And so I think that is a really big difference. I remember when I first got on, joking around, like, it feels like being on The Bachelor or The Bachelorette, because you are talking to a number of different people. And then if you find someone you're interested in, you don't know how many people they're talking to. And so there's, some really interesting new dynamics with this mode of dating.
For sure. I'm just a little curious as to how it evolved, only because I think people still meet other people traditionally, either, through, you go to a wedding and you meet somebody at the wedding, any kind of an event like that, or someone at church, or someone at school, or, high school, college, jobs, there's still all those traditional ways to meet people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I don't know what happened to that, like where that it's somehow that, I don't know, somehow online dating came in to fill a gap where maybe people just weren't meeting enough people out there to find what they want.
Yeah, I think it came with the progression of social media as well. I think a lot has progressed with technology in the last few decades. And it was, in my mind, it's inevitable that we're connecting over Facebook and email and having faster communication and more widespread communication because it's so much faster. And so online dating, it's a way to match people that you wouldn't otherwise have the opportunity to meet. And it is available at a much faster, more convenient pace.
True. Mm-hmm. And it can be cheap. It doesn't have to be super expensive, but then again, you could spend money like on a Match.com or eHarmony or something. So there's the free apps, and then there's the paid apps, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which I'm guessing if you're paying, you're probably going to get, maybe you can probably narrow it down faster and maybe save a little time over the free dating apps. Well, maybe that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, I'm not an expert on the comparison of dating apps. I don't know about that part.
So I'm looking at my questions here. What do you think about the idea of getting to know someone through social media, like using Facebook video or using Zoom? I see it as a really positive thing. I don't know. I'm all about like sort of developing a friendship first, really, really getting to know someone before getting intimate. It's not always that way, but I'd love to know what your thoughts are about utilizing these formats for getting to know someone and dating.
Yeah, I think as with most things, there's pros and cons, costs and benefits. I think that the accessibility and the convenience and ease of online technology really does expand options, and it makes it easier to meet people more quickly and engage with them at a faster pace, and sort of maybe filter through or screen out people, because you're able to engage with them so quickly versus having to wait to meet in person and then be like, oh, maybe we need to meet a second time in person before I can gather any new information. And then I think that the hazard with that as well, especially if you're talking to multiple people, is that it can be very time consuming and energetically draining. And so just kind of making sure that you're managing your own time and energy in a way that's supportive to yourself and the other things that you want to attend to. But I do think that having the opportunity to connect over social media first really also creates a space to get to know each other, just sort of psychologically, emotionally, intellectually, to talk about some of those things that are important as far as, are we compatible in how we communicate? Are we compatible in having shared values? Do we have similar sense of humor? And I, for myself anyway, had found that there's a lot I was able to sort of sense and know pretty quickly just from having a conversation, that kind of gave me an intuitive sense of, oh, I would be interested in getting to know this person more, versus, nope, no thanks, don't have any interest in that. So yeah, it's helpful, I think, in those ways.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
How can you find out quickly if you share similar values? And should someone take stock of their values before jumping into the dating scene?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're wanting to find out quickly if you have similar values, then the kind of obvious first step is taking that inventory of your own values and really knowing what is important to you. And it's actually surprising, I think, how many of us don't necessarily stop to think about that. And we just sort of go into things open-minded or a little bit blind. And I think, if we don't identify our own values and set our own boundaries up front before we enter into connection with somebody else, then we're kind of letting somebody else take the lead in setting boundaries for us, or identifying what's important. And I think that as relational beings, sometimes we have a tendency to be like, well, I don't want to judge somebody too quickly, or I don't want to assume just because we're different in this area that we might not be compatible in other areas. And so I find it helpful to not think of it as a judgment, because it's not a better than or less than thing, but to think of it as discernment. Is this going to be compatible with how I want to live my life and the choices that I want to make and where I want to spend time and energy and money? And so I think to know those things about ourselves really does set up some guideposts for, as we're meeting other people and talking to new people, to be able to sift through. If I like to be more of a homebody and kind of relax, and I meet somebody who's like, I work for an adventure crew and I, go hiking every single day and like to go skydiving on the weekend, like, that's fine, but it might not be compatible. So do we need to keep investing time, if, again, depending on what the motivation and intention is in the dating experimentation?
Yeah, I think the values thing is crucial, because it's interesting, how we were talking with your girlfriend last night about how she actually had a kind of a list of things that she was, wanting in a mate. And it turned out that the mate she ended up with, didn't match any of those wants.
Yeah.
But their values matched, right?
Yeah.
So what can you say about that? Like being cautious of not to have your list of everything, that has to be perfect or whatever.
Yeah, I think it's kind of nuanced, because it is important to have a list of some things, but more like the things about yourself, rather than our tendency is we want to put a list of, these are all the things that I need the other person to be. These are all of the things that I want the other person to do or to have, or to resemble. And most often what we're doing is projecting parts of ourselves and saying, if I could just project that onto another person and then they would be just like me, or they would do all the things that I want, that would be great. And I think when we identify values, we're not necessarily saying this is who the other person has to be. We're saying, I'm looking for a person that is going to allow me to be myself with them. And so, an obvious example, somebody who wants to have children and raise a family versus somebody who doesn't, that's about, I want to have children and raise a family. So when I'm looking for a person, I'm looking for somebody who's going to allow me to be myself in that. And somebody who doesn't want that same thing won't be compatible in that. And it's not about, he has to be 6'2" and have brown hair and purple eyes and have a specific career type, So I think when I hear people make lists, and I work with college students, so I hear a lot of lists of these are all the qualities that I want in my partner. A lot of times they're not the make it or break it values, because we get distracted focusing on the other person rather than focusing on who do I want to be in a relationship, and am I looking for somebody that's going to be flexible and compatible with me getting to be myself.
That's so cool, because a lot of women and men too, I believe, lose themselves in a relationship, and they almost, merge into the other person, and they forget who they are, and they forget what's going to, light their own fire and all of that. So I love that you brought that up. So what suggestions can you make in preparation when someone is considering online dating? I mean, you've covered some of that with the values and everything, but maybe talk about how do you vet someone, or how do you prepare and how do you vet and that kind of thing.
Yeah. Actually, I think some of the things, because I sort of took this inventory and made some of these preparations when I decided a little over a year ago that I wanted to experiment with this. And I asked a lot of my girlfriends who I knew had been in the online dating world for anywhere from 6 to 12 months, okay, what's it like, and what have you learned, and what are the things that are helpful to know? And some of the things that I did find really helpful were establish your own boundaries up front, as far as when you would feel comfortable giving your phone number or any kind of personal identification or information, that includes Facebook and Instagram. Do I want people that I'm talking to be able to find out more about me outside of just this app where we're talking, so what are some of the things that you want to know about a person before you give them your phone number? One of the things that I found most important was just giving yourself the permission up front that I can always say no to a date. I can say no to continuing to talk to somebody further. And that's actually a really hard thing for a lot of people, men and women alike, to practice, the saying no or turning somebody down. And, one of the big terms in the online dating world and just social media in general, the last 5 to 10 years, is ghosting, so people will be talking and then they'll just ghost the other person. And on the one hand, that's fine if you choose to stop talking to somebody. On the other hand, it's also fine to just be upfront and say, hey, I'm not interested. I'm going to stop talking to you now. And I actually, for myself, was thinking, it's not a comfortable thing to do, but what better arena to practice this really uncomfortable skill in than online dating? And so I think to go into it with a preparation of, these are some skills that are uncomfortable for me to say, no, thank you, I'm not interested, or hey, I've changed my mind. There were a couple dates that I accepted, hey, yeah, let's go out and get to know each other better. And then after talking for another hour, I was like, oh, actually, no, I don't want to do that. And just practicing being able to say, hey, actually, this is what I've decided. I think having other friends that you keep in the loop, as you're getting to know somebody, bouncing some of those conversations off of friends, being like, hey, this is, and I mean, this isn't for every single person you talk to, but for somebody that you might start finding a little bit more interest in. So yeah. And then I think when it comes to vetting somebody, this isn't black and white thing, but really listening to your own intuition, because more often than not, we tend to have a pretty good sense of like, oh, I feel comfortable when I'm talking with this person, or I feel like I really want to know more, or I feel like I'm really being understood in a very cool way. But I think even quicker get the intuition of like, oh, something feels off, or this is just not enjoyable, or I don't like how this person communicates, or whatever that is. And so I think it's also a really great arena to practice listening to your intuition and letting that sort of guide. Because when we don't do that, there's again that tendency for some of us to be like, oh, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I don't want to be judgmental, or I don't want to not give somebody a fair chance. And it's like, this isn't really about giving people a fair chance. It's about knowing yourself and your own values and your own boundaries. And so let it be a practice for those things. And it's okay to, trial and error, be like, oh, gave somebody my phone number and that didn't work out great. So next time, what would I do differently,
Yeah, certainly being willing to experience the, mistakes or whatever, and just bounce back from that and be like, I learned from that. So that's good. I don't know if there's a psychological study on this. I'm sure there is, but it's funny to me because, I'm in sales also, and there's a sales process in coaching and everything also. And why are people so afraid to say no? Like, I think it's so much easier and better for the whole process for people just to say what's on their mind. And what's on their mind is, I'm really not interested.
Yeah.
But why are they so afraid to say it? Because it's just
hard.
But why is it hard? There's a fear behind it. I don't know what the fear is. I'm not really sure what the fear is.
It's conflict. It's making somebody else angry. It's letting somebody down. And because of our relational nature, we tend, for the most part, to be pretty attuned to each other's feelings, and to realize that if I choose an action that's going to affect your feelings in some way, nobody likes to feel rejected. Nobody likes to feel disappointed and let down. And so I think we try to overprotect each other. It's like we don't trust each other to be able to manage feelings of disappointment and rejection. And, for a lot of us, that can come from the way that we grow up in our families or our closest friendships, where we get used to, hey, if I do something disappointing, so-and-so blows up and freaks out at me, or it risks the relationship, and that feels really bad. And so it's a lot of trying to protect from uncomfortable feelings. If I say no to somebody and then they call me names, like, that doesn't feel good to be called names. So I'm just trying to avoid all of that. But again, I think that's why this is actually a really great arena to practice those things that are uncomfortable, because at the start, it is relatively low risk and lower vulnerability, versus when we're practicing some of those things in our friendships and our more significant relationships, where saying no and setting boundaries for the first time is not an easy thing to do. So knowing that it's going to be uncomfortable, but what a great opportunity to practice that.
Very good. Okay. Can you speak to safety? What are the concerns of safety with people dating online? And can people date and have security at the same time? Sometimes I think security is really just an illusion, but like, you could address that maybe.
Yeah. Dating and forming new relationships incurs an inherent risk, and risk is just, I'm reading Peggy's comment, licensed paparazzi consultant, licensed professional counselor. Risk is just that there's an option, like there's two ways this could go. It could go good, it could go not so good. I could experience a reward from taking this risk, but also I could experience a disappointment. And so in dating, when we're getting to know somebody, the more that I invest in getting to know somebody, the more I share about myself, the more that I learn about you, the more I might start to develop feelings of attraction or desire or wanting to be liked and accepted by this person. And the more that I have those feelings, the more at risk I am to experience disappointment if I get rejected or if that person isn't on the same page as me. And so there's risk at that level. And then there's also just risk of how much do I want to expose as I'm meeting strangers about my personal information, like my phone number or where I live or, hard experiences that I've been through. And so right now, because it's a pandemic and we're talking about how dating looks a little bit different, because we're not just, oh, let's go out for a coffee or let's go out for happy hour or let's go out on a physical date. It's a really interesting opportunity to actually spend more time getting to know somebody over a screen before maybe getting to that point where there's even the option to get together in person. And even so, I think giving out a phone number or a last name where somebody can look you up on social media, those are all kind of risks to be weighed. And it's, I think, just important to be intentional about, do I know what people I feel good about taking that risk with? Because it's still a risk, so just knowing, it always could sort of go the wrong way, but also I can always block somebody's number. So hopefully the person doesn't turn out to be like a crazy stalker.
And there are some. I mean, they're definitely in the research that I did a little bit of research, just reading about online dating, and there's definitely people that end up with stalkers,
Yeah.
So you just have to, do what you can to protect yourself. Well, do you have any final words on dating during a pandemic? Because obviously we are social distancing now, and this is it's a huge risk. It's a much bigger risk now to meet somebody in person. Especially because, it takes a little while to get to know somebody and to trust them and all of that. So what do you think?
Yeah, I think, especially at the point that we're at in the pandemic, where there's some places who are starting to lift some restrictions and people are sort of falling into different camps as far as how comfortable they are, it circles back to set your own boundaries so that somebody else is not setting them for you. So if you decide going into online dating right now, I'm not comfortable for the foreseeable future meeting somebody in person, or these would be the boundaries around which it would feel safe to meet somebody in person, practice communicating that clearly with people that you talk to. And then it gives a chance too to be creative in some new ways that we might not be. What are activities that we could do over Zoom? What are games that we could play, or conversation starter questions that we could find, or ways that we can connect, watch a movie together while we're on Zoom. It's an opportunity to be creative in ways that we might not otherwise think of. And it's an opportunity to vet out and kind of decide what people we want to keep investing that energy in before the pandemic ends. And then maybe we're super excited to meet somebody in person. But I think apart from those things, just again, coming back to your own intuition, your own values, and noticing as you communicate with people, how do their boundaries seem? How does the way that they communicate fit with the way that I communicate? And then kind of going through those decisions together as far as, when do we get together in person? How creative does it feel worth getting on Zoom or FaceTime or Skype or Facebook Messenger?
Yeah, so I'm looking at some of the comments, and some people aren't so crazy about Zoom. Why does everyone want to do activities on Zoom for everything because of COVID? Well, I'm just going to answer that. I think, Peggy, it's just an option. It's just not everybody's on Zoom, but a lot of people are, and they're utilizing it for their own personal needs. They want to connect with people. I know that in my own family and with my own friends, we do like to play games. And so it's been a lot of fun. Anyway, now is a good time as any to end this conversation and reinvent yourself. So if you are looking to assess where you are in life, maybe you have some things you want to change, you want to reinvent, you can check out my website at lisanellercoaching.com, and you can get a complimentary coaching session. I do want to thank you, Lauren, for joining us again this time. I really appreciate your wisdom and your point of view, and giving us some things to think about in dating online. And these things, I think, can be taken offline as well. Like everything you said applies to the offline world, right?
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. So thank you so much. I love you, and we'll talk to you all later. Have a good night.
Bye.